here's where the Republican Party was at in 64. And by the way, the Democratic Party was going through its own crisis in 64. Up until basically 1960, the Democratic Party had been the party of the South. It had historically been the party of slavery since at least the 1830s. And it had been the party of segregation. George Wallace was a Democrat. Most of those guys, all the, the old Bull Connor and all these guys. I mean, they were proud Democrats. The South was totally Democratic. And in the 60s, as Lyndon Johnson took the White House, he put the Democratic Party sharply on the side of civil rights. Civil rights, voting rights, all these kind of things, and moved that forward very, very aggressively and very successfully. So the Democratic Party was going through a major identity change, becoming the party of all of America and the party of working America. The Democratic Party's principal form of support had been labor unions, which are democracies in a workplace, right? I mean, labor unions don't exist if more than 50% of the workers don't want them to exist, can only exist by virtue of the workers, continuing to acknowledge them, and can only engage in political activity if a majority of their members authorize it. So anyhow, you had the labor unions. So the Democratic Party is going through this. The Republican Party had split into two factions by 64. There was the Nixon, Eisenhower, Rockefeller faction, which still believed in governance. It's just that their idea of governance was slightly different from the Democrats. Well, significantly different. They really didn't think that the government should be in the business of, for example, making sure that people had access to health care. They didn't think that they had adopted democratic socialism in as much as the Republican Party back then, the establishment Republican Party, in as much as they had given up fighting Social Security, by and large. Dwight Eisenhower famously in 1953 wrote a letter to his brother Edgar in which he said, there's a small group of Texas millionaires who think we can get rid of Social Security. Their numbers are small and they are stupid. He said any political party that takes that position will never hold power again. Well, so that was, on the one hand. And then you had, on the other hand, this group of ideologues who were starting to believe this new economic theory, and it really wasn't all that new. It was a repackaged version of really Victorian era British economics. But it was successfully repackaged by Milton Friedman at the University of Chicago that said basically that if you let the wealthy run the country instead of the politicians, in other words, if we answer to wealth, to the marketplace, instead of to the people, instead of the ballot box, then things will run better. And this is based on this very seductive and simple sounding premise that, the marketplace is making a trillion decisions a second. Every time somebody goes on Amazon and buys something, they're making a decision and they're pushing the marketplace in a particular direction. More stuff is being bought of this particular product, so more gets made. Less of this particular product, that company might go out of business. The marketplace is very dynamic and does respond very successfully. There's a lot of truth to that. And, I don't want to mess with that, right? But at the same time, there are these functions that the founders and framers, the people who wrote the Constitution of the United States, said, these are the legitimate functions of government. Building roads, for example, it's in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Having a post office, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Providing for the general welfare of the citizens of the United States. It both opens and closes both Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which is the Enumerated Powers Clause, and it's in the preamble to the Constitution. So, among other things, so you had this split in the Republican Party. But the problem that the neoconservatives had, the Barry Goldwater wing had, and the reason that they went down in flames so badly in 64 was that they were basically arguing this economic argument that, get government out of the way, let the billionaires run Social Security, let the billionaires run the healthcare system, let the billionaires take over our national road system, turn it into toll roads. Let the billionaires, David Koch in 1980 ran on a platform of, do away with everything, basically. No more Medicare, no more Social Security, no Medicaid, no unemployment insurance, no minimum wage. This was the early libertarian movement inside the Republican Party. And that you can't win an election with that. You can't win an election by saying we want to make rich people richer and to hell with the working class and the working poor and the middle class. To hell with them. We're going to make, life more difficult for them. But we're going to be sure to, comfort the comfortable while we afflict the afflicted. Can't win an election doing that. So instead, in 1968, Kevin Phillips wrote about this in his book, The Emerging Republican Majority. Richard Nixon took it to heart and turned it into a system. And Lee Atwater championed this. And in fact, you got that Lee Atwater clip there. And basically it was, okay, we can't, by saying the 1% should run the country, you're not going to get the vote of the other 99%. So what do? We have to split the party into a whole bunch of factions and bring them together. So there's all those white racists down in the South that the Democratic Party just abandoned. Let's go after them. That was the Southern strategy, which worked for Nixon, worked for Reagan, and worked for Bush Sr. In fact, he super racialized it with the Willie Horton ads. And then there was, let's get the people who are afraid of gay people. Let's get the homophobes in. And so we'll put ballot issues on about, to defend marriage. And even in places where nobody was, quote, assaulting marriage, because it would bring out Republican voters. Let's put God on the ballot. We'll put ballot measures. We'll put, the Ten Commandments and public buildings, So basically it was like, and anti-abortion. Bring out the single issue voters and bring them all together under the Republican banner. And then you'll have a large enough tent that you can actually win elections. And that's been the Republican Party's strategy basically since 1968. And here's the problem. It's starting to fray. In fact, it's starting to actually damage our country. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-536-2370.
You know what you're seeing, and Heather Cox Richardson wrote about this brilliantly, I think over at Salon, is Donald Trump being the final result of the Southern strategy. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.